In the early afternoon of July the 17th, 2014, a Boeing 777-200 of Malaysia Airlines departs Amsterdam Airport Schiphol for Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The routing of this flight leads via Germany, Poland and Ukraine to the east, a standard routing to Asia that many airlines use. Flight MH17 enters Ukrainian airspace at an altitude of 33,000 feet, following airway Lima 980. The crew diverts a short distance to the north to avoid some thunderstorms when returning to the airway in the eastern part of Ukrainian airspace. In this region, an armed conflict between the Ukrainian government and armed groups is in progress. Therefore, lower levels of the airspace are restricted for civil air traffic. Flight MH17 is routed above this restricted airspace when it is downed by a Buk surface-to-air missile. Immediately after the crash of MH17, the question rose how it was possible that a scheduled commercial airliner flew over an area that was known to be a conflict zone. The armed conflict in Ukraine progressively expanded to the air, and several military aircraft had been shot down in the previous weeks. According to Ukrainian authorities, 2 of these aircraft were hit by more powerful weapons that reached higher than before. But none of the parties involved made any connection between the military developments and the possible risks posed to civil aviation. On June 6, 2014, a Notice to Airmen, or NOTAM, was issued by Ukraine to restrict the airspace over the eastern part of Ukraine up to flight level 260. This was done to protect military aircraft from ground attacks and to let them fly at a higher level. On July 14th, the restriction was raised to flight level 320. Airlines assumed that the unrestricted airspace above this level was safe. Most commercial airlines continued their flights over the region. On July the 17th, until the airspace was closed, 160 commercial flights passed through this area. 3 other airliners were in close proximity of MH17 when it disappeared from the radar screens.
All over the world there are areas where an armed conflict takes place while the airspace above those areas remain unrestricted. The risk resulting from flying over conflict areas is paid insufficient attention to by operators, authorities and aviation organizations all over the world. This needs to change. Ukraine had sufficient information to close the airspace to civil aviation prior to July 17. None of the parties involved recognized that the armed conflict in the eastern part of Ukraine would entail risks to civil aviation. Passengers should be able to trust the airline to have done everything possible to operate the flight safely. States should ensure that airspace will be closed if it's unsafe to civil aviation. In order to achieve that, information pertaining to risks and threats must be shared by countries and operators.